I was just 22 when I decided to quit my 9-to-5 job. No savings, no backup plan, and absolutely no idea what I was doing. But one thing I knew for sure, there was no way I could keep working for someone else for the rest of my life. I've always been the kind of person who dreams big and takes risks. My childhood was spent dreaming of being an entrepreneur, but the reality of adulthood always felt like a heavy weight on my shoulders. Like many people, I went to college, got a degree, and landed a job in the corporate world, but it didn't take long before I realized that this was not the life I wanted. At first, my job seemed great. I was making decent money, had benefits, and the stability that most people would kill for. But the more I got into it, the more I felt trapped. I worked for a tech company where I was a project manager. My days consisted of back-to-back meetings, endless emails, and never-ending reports. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was just another cog in the machine. My creativity, ideas, and energy felt like they were being drained every single day. One Friday, as I sat in yet another pointless meeting, I realized that I couldn't keep doing this. I stared at the clock, counting down the minutes until I could leave. I was at the breaking point. So that evening, after I clocked out, I went straight home, closed the door to my room, and spent hours thinking. I wasn't just bored, I was uninspired, and it was killing me. I knew I had to change something. But what? I had no specific plan, no product idea, and no rich uncle to bankroll my dreams. What I did have, though, was the ability to take action. I spent the entire weekend researching. I dove into entrepreneurship blogs, read books, and watched hours of videos on YouTube. Slowly, an idea started to form in my mind. I had always been good at graphic design, and people constantly told me that I had a knack for it. Maybe I could turn that into something. I thought about the number of small businesses that needed design help but didn't have the budget for big agencies. I thought about all the entrepreneurs struggling to create a brand, a website, or even just a decent logo. There were plenty of people out there who needed affordable, professional design services. That's when it hit me. Why not start a freelance graphic design business? I could work from home, set my own hours, and choose my clients. The decision wasn't easy. I was terrified. The security of my corporate job was comforting, and I knew there would be a lot of people who doubted me. I had no experience in running a business, no clients lined up, and no real understanding of the financial side of things. But I also knew one thing: if I didn't take the leap now, I might never do it. So, on Monday morning, I handed in my resignation. I'll never forget the look on my manager's face. She thought I was joking at first, but when she saw I was serious, she tried to talk me out of it. She said I was making a huge mistake, that I'd regret it. But deep down, I knew I was doing the right thing. The thought of staying in that soul-sucking job any longer was unbearable. The first few months were a blur of uncertainty. I had no clients, no reputation, and no idea how to market myself. I spent hours sending cold emails, pitching my services to small businesses, and networking with anyone who would listen. At first, it felt like I was shouting into the void. I got rejection after rejection, and at times, I questioned whether I had made the right choice. But then, one day, a small business owner replied. She needed a logo for her startup, and after a brief conversation, she hired me. It was a small project, but it was a start. I worked my ass off, creating multiple designs and making sure she was happy with the final result. She loved it. And that one project led to another. Slowly, I started to build a portfolio. I spent the next year working late into the night, learning as much as I could about running a business. I took online courses on marketing, bookkeeping, and client relations. I learned how to use social media to promote my work and gradually grew my following. My reputation started to spread, and with it, my client list expanded. The hours were long, and the work was hard, but it was fulfilling. Every project felt like a victory. Slowly but surely, my income grew, and I started to feel like I was on the right path. Around the 2-year mark, I realized that I was no longer a freelancer. I was a business owner. I had a steady stream of clients, a growing team, and a brand that people recognized. I'd made it. Well, at least that's what I thought. The reality of running a business, however, wasn't as glamorous as I imagined. There were financial challenges, hiring headaches, and the constant pressure to keep growing. I had to learn to juggle everything from managing employees to dealing with taxes and cash flow. But I was determined not to let the challenges stop me. One of the biggest lessons I learned was that success didn't happen overnight. It was a result of countless small steps, countless failures, and countless hours of hard work. I faced rejection, lost clients, and sometimes even felt like I was failing. But each time I fell, I got back up and kept moving forward. As the years went by, my business grew into something I never thought was possible. I expanded into other areas of design and branding, launched an online course to teach aspiring designers, and eventually opened an office in a new city. The freedom I once dreamed of was now a reality, and I couldn't help but feel proud of how far I had come. But I'll be honest with you, there are still days when I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. There are still nights when I'm exhausted, and I question my decisions. But then I remember why I started in the first place. I didn't want to live a life of regret. I wanted to take risks, to build something meaningful, and to prove to myself that I was capable of more. Now, I look back and realize that quitting my job wasn't a mistake. It was the best decision I ever made. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't instant success. But it was worth it. If you're thinking about taking the leap into entrepreneurship, my advice is simple: do it. If you have a passion, a drive, and the willingness to learn and fail, you can build something incredible. But don't expect it to be easy. Stay patient, stay focused, and keep going. You'll get there. Trust me. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I grew up in a small, struggling town in the Midwest. My parents weren't poor, but they weren't rich either. We lived paycheck to paycheck, and while I never went hungry, we didn't have much in terms of extras. My dad worked as a mechanic, and my mom was a nurse at the local hospital. Despite their hard work, we barely got by, and money was always tight. They did their best to give me and my two siblings a decent childhood, but I could tell things were difficult. I knew from a young age that I didn't want to live like this forever. When I turned 16, I got my first job at a local fast food joint. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something, and I was determined to save every penny. I worked weekends, evenings after school, and picked up extra shifts whenever I could. It wasn't easy, but the work ethic my parents instilled in me made it feel doable. I saved up enough to buy my first car by the time I was 17, a beat-up, old Honda Civic. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and that felt like a huge achievement. In high school, I realized that I had a natural talent for technology. I wasn't the most social kid, but I loved tinkering with computers, taking them apart, and putting them back together just to see how they worked. I started building custom computers for friends and family, fixing their broken devices, and even helping out teachers when their school-issued laptops wouldn't work. Word spread, and soon I was the go-to tech guy in town. This wasn't a huge business by any means, but it was something that helped me save a little extra money. After graduation, I wasn't sure what to do. College wasn't an option for me at the time. My family simply couldn't afford it, and I didn't have the grades to earn scholarships. I thought about going into tech full-time, but the idea of starting a business from scratch seemed impossible. I didn't have money, a network, or a clear path. But something inside me pushed me to try. I was tired of seeing my family struggle. I wanted to be the one who changed things. I didn't know how or where to start, but I knew that I had to try. So, I took a leap. I borrowed a small sum from my parents, who, despite their concerns, were supportive. I used that money to rent a tiny storefront on the edge of town and opened a computer repair shop. It was far from glamorous, just a small space with a couple of workbenches, some basic tools, and a computer or two. I advertised with flyers, word of mouth, and some basic social media marketing. I was hopeful but scared. I didn't have a clear business plan, and honestly, I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I had to make it work. In the beginning, it was slow, really slow. Some days, I didn't have a single customer, and that was incredibly frustrating. I spent a lot of time tinkering with my own projects and trying to learn everything I could about running a business. I watched YouTube tutorials, read blogs, and reached out to other small business owners for advice. But no matter how hard I worked, it felt like nothing was happening. I wanted to give up more times than I cared to admit. My savings were dwindling, and I was starting to lose hope. Then, one day, a breakthrough came. A local school district reached out to me. They needed someone to help fix the computers they used for standardized testing. The previous tech guy had left, and they didn't have anyone else. It wasn't a huge job, but it was a consistent one, and it gave me the credibility I needed. I worked long hours, sometimes pulling all-nighters to get everything fixed and ready in time. I didn't mind the hard work, though. It felt like an opportunity, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. As word spread that I could be trusted with big jobs, more businesses and schools started reaching out. Slowly but surely, I started to build a customer base. I was still living paycheck to paycheck, but the work was steady, and I was starting to gain confidence. I continued to reinvest whatever profits I had back into the business. I upgraded my equipment, hired a couple of part-time employees, and eventually moved to a larger location. The business was growing, and for the first time, I could see a light at the end of the tunnel. Fast forward a few years, and my computer repair business had expanded into a full-service IT company. We provided everything from network setup to data security solutions. I hired a team of experts, including software developers, network engineers, and customer service reps. We were handling contracts with local businesses, school districts, and even a few larger companies in nearby cities. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of sleepless nights, but it was all worth it. Then came the real turning point. One of our clients, a medium-sized e-commerce company, approached me with a challenge. They were growing fast, and their IT infrastructure couldn't keep up. They were experiencing slow website load times, server crashes, and customer complaints. They asked if I could help them optimize their systems. I knew that if I succeeded, it could be the next big step for my company. We worked tirelessly on the project. My team and I rebuilt their entire IT infrastructure, streamlined their website, and implemented a new customer support system. It wasn't easy, and it required a lot of coordination, but when we finally launched the new system, it was a game changer for them. Their sales doubled, customer satisfaction skyrocketed, and they became one of the top players in their niche. That project changed everything for my business. The success with that e-commerce company gave us the credibility we needed to land even bigger contracts. I started networking with tech giants, attending conferences, and building relationships with investors. Within a few years, I was able to sell the business for a substantial amount of money. I could have just taken the money and walked away, but instead, I decided to use what I'd learned to help other aspiring entrepreneurs. I started a tech accelerator, offering mentorship and funding to small businesses in the IT space. Today, I'm the founder of a successful tech startup that focuses on helping other small businesses optimize their IT infrastructure. I look back on my journey and can't believe how far I've come. From working long hours at a fast food restaurant to running a multi-million-dollar company, I've learned that persistence and a willingness to learn are the most important ingredients for success. I still remember the days when I wondered if I'd ever make it. But those days are behind me now. If there's one piece of advice I can give to anyone struggling to make their business work, it's this: don't give up, even when things seem impossible. The road is never easy, but with enough grit and determination, you can turn your dreams into reality. It may take longer than you expect, and you'll face obstacles you never saw coming. But every setback is an opportunity to learn. Keep pushing forward, and the results will come. I always believed that there was a simple formula for success in entrepreneurship: work hard, stay focused, and the money would come. For years, I followed this mentality. But life has a way of teaching you that things aren't always as simple as they appear. My journey as an entrepreneur was not linear, and if I'm honest, it was filled with moments where I questioned everything. But in the end, it was those moments of doubt that made me who I am today. I started my first business in my early 20s. I was full of ambition but completely clueless about what it took to run a company. I had a brilliant idea for a product, or at least I thought it was brilliant. I didn't have much money, but I had energy, optimism, and a willingness to take risks. I scraped together a few $1,000s from my savings and loans from friends and family. I rented a small office space, got some basic equipment, and launched my first company, a startup that aimed to create eco-friendly, affordable gadgets. In the beginning, everything seemed to go perfectly. The website launched, the first round of products sold out within a few weeks, and I thought I was on my way to success. But reality quickly set in. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to handle inventory, how to deal with customer complaints, or how to scale a business. Worse, I didn't know how to manage cash flow. Despite my initial success, my expenses started piling up. I was pouring money into advertising, paying for more inventory, and hiring people to help. But the revenue didn't keep up. I found myself constantly chasing payments, dipping into savings, and living paycheck to paycheck. I remember one night, after a long day of running around, sitting in my office alone and staring at the numbers on my spreadsheet. realizing that I was on the verge of bankruptcy. The debt was overwhelming. It was then that I made the hardest decision of my entrepreneurial journey. I had to shut the business down. It felt like a failure, like everything I had worked for was gone. My friends and family told me it wasn't a failure, it was a learning experience. But in the moment, that didn't help. I felt like I had let everyone down, and worse, I had let myself down. I spent the next few months licking my wounds. I didn't know what to do. I considered giving up on entrepreneurship entirely. I had lost money, time, and confidence. I needed something else. But after a while, I realized that the experience wasn't a failure, it was a lesson. I had learned so much about running a business, even if it was the hard way. I wasn't ready to give up yet. I started thinking about my next venture, but this time, I was going to do things differently. I knew I needed more knowledge, more experience, and a better approach. I decided to go back to school, not for a degree, but to take online courses on marketing, finance, and product development. I worked at odd jobs to support myself while I took these courses and rebuilt my savings. The lessons were invaluable. I learned how to calculate profit margins, create a sustainable business plan, and manage cash flow. But most importantly, I learned to understand the market and my customers. With a renewed sense of purpose and a much better understanding of business, I launched my second company. This time, I was more patient. I took things slowly, focusing on building relationships with customers, improving the quality of my product, and most importantly, staying grounded in reality. I didn't try to scale too quickly. I kept my costs low and reinvested everything into the business. The second time around, things started clicking. The product gained traction. I focused on providing excellent customer service and building a loyal community around my brand. The growth was slow, but it was steady. I started seeing profits after 6 months, and instead of blowing that money on advertising or unnecessary expenses, I reinvested it back into the business. I hired a small team of people who shared my vision and worked hard to grow together. But just as things were starting to go well, I faced another huge obstacle: competition. A giant corporation launched a similar product that had more resources, a bigger marketing budget, and a larger reach. I remember feeling defeated, thinking that no matter how hard I worked, there was no way I could compete with them. However, this time I didn't quit. I decided to focus on what made my company different: the personal touch. I reached out to my customers directly, created a strong social media presence, and started collaborating with influencers who shared my brand's values. I kept the quality of my products high and began offering customized solutions for clients. It wasn't about competing with the big players. It was about carving out a niche where my company could thrive. Slowly, but surely, I built a loyal following, and that made all the difference. Years passed, and my business grew. It was never easy, but it was always worth it. Eventually, my company reached the point where I could finally start thinking about scaling properly. We expanded into new markets, hired more staff, and even started outsourcing some of the work that had been eating up my time. I had learned to delegate and trust my team, and it paid off. We hit new revenue milestones, and I was able to pay back all the debts I had accumulated during those tough early years. But even now, I'm still learning. I've had setbacks, failures, and moments of doubt, but I've learned to embrace them. They're not the end of the story, they're just part of the process. Entrepreneurship isn't about having a perfect plan or always being successful. It's about persistence, adaptability, and the willingness to keep going when things get tough. Today, I look back on my journey, and I can't help but be proud of how far I've come. The road to success wasn't straight, but it was mine to navigate. I went from struggling to stay afloat to leading a thriving business. But most importantly, I learned that no matter how hard it gets, quitting is never the answer. Success isn't about avoiding failure. It's about learning from it and using it as fuel to keep pushing forward. I'm still running my business today, and while I don't have it all figured out, I've finally come to peace with the fact that the journey is just as important as the destination. Every mistake, every challenge, and everyone along the way has shaped me into the entrepreneur I am today. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I always knew I wanted to do something big, but for the longest time, I couldn't figure out what that was. Growing up in a small town, everyone around me seemed content with their 9-to-5 jobs, a steady paycheck, and just enough to get by. But not me. I was the dreamer, the one who would stay up late reading about successful entrepreneurs, marveling at their stories and wondering how they got to where they were. At 22, I had just finished college with a degree in business, but I was nowhere near ready for the typical office life that seemed to be the next logical step. I decided to try something different. I didn't have much money, just enough to scrape by for a few months, but I had something else, ideas. I started researching online, looking for ways to build a business with minimal startup costs. I didn't want to take out loans or ask my family for help. I had to do this on my own. After a lot of trial and error, I decided to start a dropshipping business. It seemed like the perfect fit for someone with limited funds. No inventory to manage, no warehouse to rent, and the ability to work from anywhere. I found a supplier overseas, set up a website, and started promoting my products through social media ads. For the first few months, I barely made any sales. My website looked amateurish, my ads weren't hitting the right audience, and my product offerings weren't appealing enough. It was disheartening, but I kept pushing. I spent hours each day refining my website, studying successful e-commerce strategies, and experimenting with different marketing techniques. Slowly but surely, things started to change. I got my first sale, and then another, and another. But it wasn't a straight line. For every successful week, there was a month of no sales, and for every promising ad campaign, there were failures. But each failure taught me something new, and I learned to pivot, adjust, and keep improving. A few months in, I realized that while dropshipping was a good start, it wasn't going to get me to where I wanted to be. The margins were slim, and I was at the mercy of my suppliers. If they raised their prices or ran out of stock, my business would suffer. I had to find something more sustainable. That's when I decided to create my own product. I didn't want to just sell random items. I wanted something unique that would stand out in a crowded market. After a lot of brainstorming and research, I came up with the idea for a high-quality portable blender, something that could make smoothies and shakes on the go. I knew there were other blenders on the market, but I believed I could create a better one, more durable, more efficient, and more stylish. Creating a product from scratch was a whole new challenge. I had to find a reliable manufacturer, negotiate prices, design the packaging, and handle shipping logistics. It was overwhelming at times, and I felt like I was in way over my head. But this time, I wasn't just sitting around hoping things would work out. I actively reached out to manufacturers, asked for samples, and even flew to China to meet potential partners face-to-face. It was expensive, exhausting, and stressful, but I was determined to make it work. After months of negotiation, design revisions, and production delays, I finally had a product ready for sale. I launched my portable blender on my website, along with a targeted ad campaign. This time, things were different. The product resonated with people. It wasn't just another generic blender. It was something that catered to a specific lifestyle, people who wanted to stay healthy and on the go. The sales started rolling in, and I quickly realized that this was the breakthrough I had been waiting for. But success didn't come without its challenges. As my business grew, I had to figure out how to manage inventory, handle customer service, and deal with fulfillment issues. The pressure mounted, and there were times when I wondered if I had made a mistake. But I stuck with it. I hired a small team to help with customer service and fulfillment, and I outsourced the technical aspects of running the website to experts. I focused on marketing and scaling the business. The more time I spent on what I was good at, the faster things grew. Eventually, I expanded my product line to include other health and fitness accessories, and my brand started to gain recognition. I reinvested every dollar I made back into the business, buying more inventory, expanding my advertising efforts, and hiring new employees. Then came the real turning point. I was approached by an investor who was interested in my company. At first, I was hesitant. I had built this business from the ground up, and the idea of giving up a part of it felt like a betrayal to my dream. But after a lot of discussions, I realized that this could be the opportunity to take the business to the next level. The investor brought in not only capital but also experience in scaling businesses. With their help, I expanded my reach globally and began selling my products in multiple countries. What started as a small, one-person operation was now a full-fledged company with hundreds of employees and customers worldwide. But even with all the success, there were moments when I felt overwhelmed. There were times when I wanted to quit, times when the stress felt like too much, and times when I questioned if I had made the right decisions. But I always remembered why I started in the first place, to create something that mattered, something that made a difference. And that kept me going. Fast forward to today, and my business is thriving. We've expanded into retail stores, launched new product lines, and become a recognized name in the industry. I've sold the company to a larger conglomerate, but I still oversee its growth as part of the management team. Looking back, I can hardly believe how far I've come. From the days of struggling to make a sale in my tiny apartment to running a global business, It's been an incredible journey. But the one thing that still stands out to me is the importance of persistence. It's easy to give up when things aren't going your way, but if you keep pushing, keep learning, and keep adapting, you'll find your way to success. It wasn't a smooth ride by any means, but every setback was a lesson, and every failure was just another step forward. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: take the leap. It won't be easy, but if you're willing to work harder than you've ever worked before and never give up, you'll be amazed at what you can achieve. And remember, success isn't about getting everything right. It's about getting back up every time you fall. The road is long, but it's worth it. I never thought I'd be telling this story, especially not in a place like Reddit, but here it goes. It's been a wild ride, full of highs and lows, and looking back, I'm still trying to figure out how it all worked out. I was never the typical entrepreneur. In fact, I didn't even want to be one. I went to college, got my degree in marketing, and landed a decent job right out of school. I thought I had it all figured out: a solid 9-to-5 job, a steady paycheck, and the chance to work my way up the corporate ladder. But if I'm being honest, I was never truly happy. The work didn't excite me, and I found myself counting down the hours until I could go home every single day. There was a gnawing feeling inside me that I was meant to do something else, something bigger. The tipping point came one morning when I was sitting in my cramped cubicle, staring at my computer screen, scrolling through social media. A post popped up about a small, indie business that was making waves in the industry, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I realized that I had the same skills, the same drive, and the same opportunities to do something like that too. But there was one problem: I had no idea where to start. At first, I spent months researching everything I could about starting a business. I read blogs, watched YouTube videos, and listened to podcasts. I was fascinated by stories of entrepreneurs who started with nothing and built something huge. But with every article I read and every video I watched, the more I realized how much I didn't know. There were terms I didn't understand, legal stuff I had no clue about, and endless steps that seemed overwhelming. The fear of failure began to creep in, and for a while, I considered just sticking with my job and forgetting about the idea of starting my own business. But something kept pulling me back. I kept thinking about those stories of people who had done it, who had built something from scratch, and who were now living life on their own terms. I couldn't let go of the dream, no matter how scary it seemed. One day, after a particularly frustrating meeting at work, I decided to take the plunge. I quit my job. I know, it sounds crazy, but deep down I knew it was the right decision. I didn't have a clear plan, but I knew I couldn't keep living in a job that didn't inspire me. I gave my notice, packed up my desk, and walked out of the office for the last time. I won't lie, that first month after quitting was rough. I had no income, no safety net, and no backup plan. I spent my days brainstorming ideas, trying to figure out what kind of business I could start. At first, I thought about opening a coffee shop, but I quickly realized that the startup costs were way out of my reach. Then I thought about an online store, but I didn't have a unique product to sell. Everything I came up with seemed to hit a dead end. But one day, while scrolling through social media, again, I saw a post about a new trend in digital marketing that seemed to be blowing up. People were creating ebooks, online courses, and digital products that they could sell to anyone, anywhere. I knew I had marketing skills, and I had always enjoyed writing, so I thought, why not create an ebook? But the idea of writing a whole book from scratch seemed daunting. I sat down at my computer, opened up a blank document, and stared at the screen for hours. I had no idea where to start. But then I remembered something: the idea that had inspired me to leave my job in the first place. I had learned so much about digital marketing on my own over the past few months, and I realized that I could help other people who were just getting started, like I had been. So, I decided to write a guide on how to get started in digital marketing for beginners. I spent the next few weeks writing, editing, and designing the ebook. It wasn't perfect, but I knew I had something valuable to offer. I created a simple website to sell it and launched it to the world. The first few days were quiet, crickets, actually, but then something unexpected happened. I started getting emails from people thanking me for the guide and telling me how helpful it had been. And then, slowly but surely, the sales started coming in. The first month, I made a few $100s. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me motivated. I kept refining the ebook, improving the website, and even started a blog to attract more traffic. Over the next few months, things started to snowball. I created an email list, started offering free resources to build trust with my audience, and slowly built a community around my brand. As the business grew, I realized that I had to scale it. I couldn't do everything myself anymore, so I hired a couple of part-time assistants to help with customer service and content creation. I also invested in ads to reach more people and worked on partnerships with other content creators to expand my reach. By the end of the first year, my business had made over $100,000 in sales. I was living the dream, or at least a version of it. I still had a long way to go, but I was finally doing something that excited me, something that I built from the ground up. The next few years were a whirlwind. I created more digital products, launched an online course, and even started a podcast. I reached people from all over the world, and the business grew faster than I ever imagined. But with the growth came new challenges. I had to navigate taxes, hire a bigger team, and deal with the stress of managing a growing business. There were times when I thought about giving up, but I always reminded myself why I started. Now, I'm proud of what I've built. I'm not a millionaire, but I've created a life where I'm in control of my time, my work, and my income. I still face obstacles, and I still make mistakes, but I wouldn't trade this life for anything. Looking back, I realized that the key wasn't having a perfect plan or knowing exactly what I was doing from the start. The key was taking that first step, even when I had no idea where it would lead. The key was believing that I could create something from nothing. So, if you're reading this and you're thinking about starting your own business, I want to tell you, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be scary, overwhelming, and there will be days when you want to quit. But if you keep going, if you push through the doubt and the fear, you can build something amazing. I'm living proof of that. I started a side hustle in my garage that accidentally made me a millionaire, but I almost blew it all because I couldn't let go. Back in 2018, I was 26, recently laid off from a mid-tier marketing firm. I had a little savings, no kids, and a lot of pent-up frustration. One night, after a few too many beers and browsing through Reddit and YouTube rabbit holes, I got obsessed with the idea of custom mechanical keyboards. Not just buying one, building them. I wasn't even that into keyboards before that. But the aesthetics, the sound, the feel, something about it hooked me. I had no technical background besides knowing how to plug in a mouse, but I started slow. Bought some kits. Learned to solder poorly. My first builds were a mess. Wires everywhere, keys misfiring, switches installed backward. But I was having a blast. I posted my builds online, mostly in keyboard subreddits and niche Discord servers. People liked the vibe of what I was making: wooden cases, resin wrist rests, pastel keycaps I dyed myself. One guy DM'd me asking if I'd sell him one. I said yes and charged $120, which barely covered parts. Then another person asked. Then 3 more. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, told me to set up a Shopify site. I called it Clackmouth Company. I threw together some product photos, wrote cheeky descriptions, and priced each board at $180. I figured if I sold 10 a month, that'd be cool beer money. In the first month, I sold 37. Turns out, the combo of aesthetic design and limited quantity hit the right niche. People were sharing my site, tagging me on Instagram, YouTubers were reviewing my boards. Demand exploded, and I couldn't keep up. I was still hand-assembling everything in a one-car garage that also housed a washer and dryer from the 90s. By month 4, I had a 3-month waitlist and had to start refunding orders just to keep up. I didn't sleep. I had back pain. I nearly lit the garage on fire once soldering a PCB too close to a bottle of acetone. My girlfriend staged a kind of intervention, asking if I wanted this to be a hobby or an actual business. So, I made my first big decision. I hired help. I found a local college student who was into keyboards and was better than me at soldering. Then another. I paid them per build. Quality improved. So did my sanity. In early 2020, the pandemic hit. Suddenly, everyone was working from home and wanted a home office upgrade. My waitlist went from 200 people to over 2,000 in 3 months. I was featured in a BuzzFeed article about work-from-home essentials. I sold out every batch within hours. Revenue for 2020 hit $960,000. Profit was about a third of that. I had to learn about taxes really fast. I moved production out of my garage into a small warehouse unit. I bought machines to laser cut my own cases. I partnered with a keycap designer overseas. I expanded the product line. I was living the dream, right? Here's where I nearly blew it. As the brand grew, so did the pressure. I micromanaged everything. I'd fix my team's work because I didn't think anyone else could match my aesthetic. I delayed launches because I wanted every color perfect. I refused to license out any designs or let go of any production steps. We missed deadlines. Refund request declined. I stayed up all night replying to angry emails, convinced no one could care about the brand as much as I did. In mid-2021, I had a full-blown panic attack at 3 a.m. while stress scrolling our customer service inbox. My heart felt like it was breaking open. I thought I was dying. The ER doctor told me it was anxiety. Said I should consider stepping back from whatever was burning me out. I didn't listen, of course. Entrepreneurs are stubborn. But a few days later, my lead builder quit. Then our logistics guy gave notice. My girlfriend packed a bag and said she was going to stay at her sister's for a bit. She told me I was turning into someone she didn't recognize. That hit harder than any customer complaint. So I called a mentor, an old boss I barely kept in touch with. He told me, if you want to scale, you either build a brand or you build a prison. You've built yourself a beautiful little prison. That sentence stayed with me. I took a step back, hired a proper operations manager, let him set up systems. I stopped answering every email. I focused on design, on the part one loved. I even gave up quality control to a hired team lead after months of resisting. And guess what? The quality didn't drop. It got better. By 2022, we'd hit $2.1 million in revenue. I was sleeping again. My girlfriend came back. We got a dog. Life started to feel like mine again. Now it's 2025. Clacksmith Company has 8 employees, 2 part-time designers, and a 3-month rolling product line. We do collaborations, limited runs, and have even been featured in GQ and Wired. We just hit $5 million in lifetime sales. Sometimes I miss the garage, the buzz of doing it all myself. But then I think about that panic attack, about nearly burning down my house over a keyboard. I realize that success isn't doing everything. It's knowing when to let go. And yeah, I still build keyboards. Not for customers anymore, just for myself. Late at night. No pressure. Just the sound of switches clicking under my fingers, like music I wrote myself. I never intended to become an entrepreneur. In fact, I used to make fun of the guys who'd call themselves serial entrepreneurs on LinkedIn while living with their parents. I was a high school English teacher for 6 years, and I loved it. I thought I'd do it for the rest of my life, until one week flipped everything upside down. It started on a Tuesday. My principal told us in a staff meeting that due to budget cuts, half the department would be laid off. It won't affect you, he said, with a weak smile. But on Friday, I was called into his office and handed a pink slip. No warning. No severance. Just a handshake and a promise of a glowing recommendation. I had $3 for 100 in savings, a $620 car payment, and rent due in 3 weeks. I went home, cracked a beer, and did what most people in a panic do, scroll job boards and stress-eat chips. I must have applied to 50 jobs that night, from writing gigs to copy editing roles, even a position at a pet crematorium, don't ask. But the world didn't need another English teacher. At least, not one without a master's degree. 3 weeks in, I was down to $400. Desperation does weird things to you. It makes you look at the stack of rejection emails and think, what if I created something instead of waiting to be picked? I remembered a project I used to give to my students, create a business plan for a fake startup. One of my favorite students, Emily, had made up this imaginary company called Note Ninja, a website where students could trade detailed notes anonymously and get peer-reviewed help. It had stuck with me because it was simple and brilliant. I messaged Emily on Instagram and asked her if I could borrow the idea. She was in college and said, go for it. I'd love to see it actually exist. So that was it. I had an idea, but no tech skills. I'd never coded a single line, didn't know what a wireframe was, and couldn't afford a developer. I took out a notepad and started sketching. The homepage, the submission form, the review system. I stayed up for 2 nights just drawing screens and researching no-code platforms. Eventually, I found one that let me build a prototype for free. It was clunky and ugly, but it worked. I called it NoteHatch. To seed the platform, I started posting to subreddits and Discord groups for college students, pretending to be a team of educators launching a new peer support tool. I offered $5 Amazon gift cards to anyone who uploaded original notes and reviewed 2 other users' uploads. I had to drive DoorDash 6 hours a day just to afford the gift cards. But within 3 weeks, I had 200 users and nearly 1,000 uploads. That was when a friend of mine, Carlos, who worked at a mid-sized edtech company, reached out. He said, this could be something. You need to make it legit before someone steals it. He introduced me to his cousin, Nina, a freelance UX designer. She offered to revamp the site for $1, 500, payable in 3 installments. I said yes without knowing where the money would come from. To pay her, I pawned my PS5, canceled my car insurance, don't do this, and sold 2 of my old watches. We launched the redesigned version 2 months later. This time, it looked real. I added a feature that ranked notes by quality and included a Buy Me a Coffee button so students could tip the creators. The first month after relaunch, we made $87. The second month, $320. By month 4, creators had made over $1,000 in tips, and I had my first viral post on Twitter. Someone called us the Venmo for nerds. That brought in over 3,000 new users in 48 hours and crashed the site. I had to scale fast. I joined every startup accelerator I could find, pitched to every local investor, even cold DM'd angel investors on LinkedIn. I was ghosted by 98% of them, laughed out of 2 Zoom pitches, and got 1 callback. A former professor turned VC agreed to invest $25,000 for 10% equity if I could prove 10,000 monthly users and 20% growth over 3 months. That night, I bought a whiteboard and wrote 10K users or homeless at the top. I ran contests. I partnered with micro-influencers. I even asked Emily, the student who gave me the original idea, to do a testimonial video from her dorm room. We hit 10,800 users in 2.5 months. Growth was at 27%. The investor wired the money the same day. I cried in the shower. Not because of the money, but because someone finally believed in it. In me. With that cash, I hired my first dev. Her name was Sasha, and she rewrote the whole backend in 2 weeks. The site stopped crashing. We added features students had been begging for: course-specific threads, AI-generated summaries, and night mode. Huge hit. User growth exploded. By the 1-year mark, we had 84,000 users and had facilitated over $200,000 in micro tips to students. We were featured in 2 education blogs and got shortlisted for a regional startup award. I now have a small team of 6. We're still bootstrapped outside of that first investment, and I pay myself just enough to keep the lights on. But we're building something that genuinely helps people, and that makes the ramen dinners and sleepless nights feel worth it. I never planned to be an entrepreneur. I didn't have a rich uncle, a trust fund, or an MBA. I had a pink slip, a borrowed idea, and a reason to try. So if you're sitting there, wondering if your dumb little idea could ever become something, here's my advice: it won't if you don't start. I never planned to be an entrepreneur. I was 28, broke, and sleeping in a roach-infested studio apartment in Baltimore with peeling paint and a heater that only worked in July. I'd been fired from my 3rd sales job in 2 years, not because I was bad, but because I couldn't stop questioning the system. Every meeting, I'd poke holes in the process. Every quarter, I'd propose a new tool, a new pitch deck, a new angle. My bosses said I was not a team player. Translation: I didn't shut up and follow. So there I was, 28, eating canned tuna with my last pack of ramen and drinking water out of a chipped mug that said, "World's Best Boss," a gag gift from my last job. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't applying to another job. I was going to make something. What? I had no idea. 2 weeks later, I started a business completely by accident. My friend Sam, a barista who moonlighted as a music producer, called me complaining about how hard it was to find decent soundproofing gear for his tiny studio apartment. I told him I'd figure something out. I scavenged YouTube and discovered a method using cheap moving blankets, PVC pipe, and Velcro to make a DIY sound booth. I built it for him in 3 days. He loved it. He posted it on Instagram. Then 2 of his friends messaged me asking if I could build them one. I charged $200, made each for $60 in materials. 3 more people asked. Then 5. Then a dozen. I made a $500 website on Squarespace and called it Booth EZ. I shot a grainy video on my iPhone of me assembling a booth in my living room and slapped it on the homepage. I offered 3 sizes. Delivery in 5 to 7 days. All handmade. All by me. That was February 2020. By April, I'd built 87 booths. My studio apartment looked like a warehouse for acoustic blankets. My neighbors thought I was running a meth lab with how often I was hauling giant rolled-up packages in and out. I hired my first helper, a college kid named Miguel who answered my Craigslist post. I paid him $15 an hour, cash. He didn't ask questions, just showed up and drilled holes. We cranked out booths like lunatics in my apartment until my landlord threatened to evict me for violating the lease's no commercial activity clause. So I rented a garage. Well, technically it was a 3-car garage behind a mechanic shop on the edge of town. It smelled like oil and dead ambition, but it was cheap and no one bothered me. We moved everything in one weekend, and for the first time, I felt like I had a real business. Then COVID hit. Musicians, podcasters, remote workers, suddenly everyone needed a quiet place to record. Sales exploded, from 20 units a month to 200. I couldn't keep up. I borrowed $10K from my cousin, bought a laser cutter, upgraded materials, and hired 2 more people. By August 2020, we were clearing $30K a month in profit. I reinvested every penny. We redesigned the booth to be modular, hired a local engineer to create custom aluminum joints, found a manufacturer in Ohio who could produce them in batches. We switched to eco-friendly materials and branded them as Green Sound Spaces. I even got a Shopify store up and running with integrated order tracking and automated customer support. In January 2021, we hit $1M in total sales. I cried in my Honda Civic in a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot. Ugly cried, full-on tears and snot. Because I remembered sitting in that apartment just a year earlier, broke and hopeless, thinking I was a failure. Then came the hard part. A Chinese company ripped off my design. They found my store, reverse-engineered the booth from my video, and started selling it on Amazon for half the price. My sales plummeted. Customer service was a nightmare. People were asking why our booth cost $4.99 when they could get one on Amazon for $2.49. I panicked, froze, lost sleep. My team looked to me, and I had no answers. Then, I did the only thing I knew how to do, fight. We rebranded again, leaned into quality. I changed our pitch, Booth EZ, American-built, artisanal soundproofing. I reached out to music schools, podcast networks, YouTubers, offered affiliate deals, sent out 200 units for free to influencers and creators. A few caught on. One big break came when a famous Twitch streamer showed off his Booth EZ live on stream. He didn't even tag us, but his chat exploded with "Where'd you get that?" I paid for someone to scrape the clip, edit it, and we ran it as an ad. ROI? 14x. That one clip saved the business. In 2022, we broke $3.2M in revenue. I moved into a legit warehouse. We had 14 employees. We added accessories, LED lights, mic stands, carpet tiles, all designed to make the booth feel premium. By 2023, we were bootstrapped, debt-free, and quietly dominating a niche. We weren't huge. No VC funding. No Silicon Valley buzz. But we were profitable, respected, and real. Now, in 2025, I still don't call myself a CEO. I'm just a guy who figured out one problem, helped a few people, and built a business brick by brick. The funniest part? I still live below my means. I drive the same Civic. Still eat tuna sometimes, by choice now. But every day, I walk into that warehouse, see the team, the boxes going out, the emails from customers saying, "This changed how I work," and I smile. Because the truth is, I didn't just build a booth. I built a way out. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I started a fake coffee company as a joke. Now it's a multi-million-dollar brand, and I don't know how to stop. 3 years ago, I was a broke graphic designer working at a barely functioning startup in Chicago. I was living in a studio apartment with no AC, splitting rent with a roommate who had 4 reptiles and no job. I was juggling freelance gigs, burning out fast, and hating every moment of the fake hustle culture I kept seeing on Instagram. You know the kind. Black and white photos of espresso shots with captions like "grind never stops." So one night, after 3 cups of real coffee and 0 hours of sleep, I did something stupid. I designed a fake coffee brand just to make fun of all of it. I called it Burnt. Tagline: coffee for people who hate coffee but love capitalism. The logo was a sad coffee bean on fire. I mocked up a few absurd product descriptions: single origin espresso sourced from the last legal tree in Brooklyn, and notes of regret, desperation, and a faint whiff of mint. I slapped it all on a minimal, painfully hip website I built in 2 hours and threw it on Reddit with the caption, "Startup idea. Who wants in?" It blew up. I expected 10 people to laugh. Instead, within 24 hours, I had 40,000 upvotes and over 600 messages. Half were people laughing. The other half? Genuinely asking how to order. That's when I panicked. I had no product, no coffee, no plan. Just a name and a half-functional Squarespace site with buttons that didn't even work. So I did what any sleep-deprived idiot with imposter syndrome and a fear of confrontation would do. I told people we were sold out due to overwhelming demand. Then I added a mailing list sign-up. Within a week, I had over 12,000 emails. Now, here's where things spiral. My roommate, whose full-time job at that point was breeding geckos, suggested I actually try selling something. What if people actually want burnt coffee? He said between cleaning a terrarium. Like, ironically? I figured, what the hell? So I started reaching out to roasters. Local, indie ones who weren't too big to ignore a weird email. I pitched burnt as a performance art project. One finally replied, "You want me to sell you good coffee so you can call it bad coffee?" Exactly. He was in. I ordered 200 bags, branded them with labels I printed at FedEx, wrote absurd tasting notes on each one. Citrus notes so sharp they'll remind you of that time your ex said, "We need to talk." Stuff like that. I priced it stupid high $26 for a 12 ounces bag, figuring no one would actually buy it. I sold out in 4 days. What followed was a blur of chaos and caffeine. Suddenly, burnt wasn't a joke anymore. It was a real business. Influencers started posting it. People who didn't even drink coffee were buying it just for the brand. I even got a DM from someone on a dating app saying, "I saw your coffee on TikTok. Are you that burnt guy?" We scaled fast. Too fast. I brought on a co-founder, my college friend Melanie, who actually had experience in operations, and together we tried to turn the meme into a machine. We expanded the product line. Burnt decaf for when you want to suffer, but less. Burnt cold brew, straight from the void, and burnt pods, because your Keurig deserves punishment. We made merch, mugs that said, "I hate mornings," and "myself," tees with fake inspirational quotes like, "Rise and cry." Sales exploded. I quit my design job. Melanie left her ad agency. We moved into a real office, a tiny co-working space with free LaCroix and passive-aggressive notes in the shared fridge. Our first employee was a guy named Trevor who had a man bun and 3 side hustles. He handled customer service and wrote sarcastic auto-replies like, "Thanks for your order. It's too late to back out now. You're $1,480,000 in revenue. You're $2,2.1 million. I started getting asked to speak at founder events. I once gave a keynote called "How to Accidentally Build a Cult" in front of 600 people. I didn't even use slides, just stood there holding a burnt mug and told the truth. I have no idea what I'm doing, and somehow, that's working. Here's the thing, though. Somewhere around year 3, the joke stopped being funny. We started getting copied. Badly. Knockoff brands called things like Chard and Scorched Grounds popped up, trying to replicate our tone. Investors started sniffing around. One VC firm offered us $4 million for a minority stake. I almost said yes, until they sent branding suggestions that included replacing our tagline with "Fuel Your Ambition." I gagged. Melanie and I started arguing. I wanted to keep it weird. She wanted to grow. "You can't run a real business on sarcasm forever," she said. "At some point, you need structure." I didn't want structure. I wanted chaos. I missed the days when burnt was just me and a stupid idea at 3 a.m. So I did something dumb again. I made a post on Reddit, under my original burner account, titled AMA. I created a coffee brand as a joke, and now it makes millions. Help. It went viral. People asked everything. Where I source beans. What my margins are. Whether I cry in the shower sometimes. It reminded me why I started. Not for money. Not for success. But for the absurdity of it. Melanie saw the post and texted me 3 words. "We need to talk." We met in the office at midnight. Talked until 3 a.m. about what we really wanted. She wanted to build something sustainable. I wanted to build something unforgettable. We found a compromise. She'd run ops. I'd run creative. We'd hire a CEO to handle everything neither of us wanted. Now, Burn is still thriving, but on our terms. We still write dumb tasting notes. We still price things outrageously. And we donate a chunk of profits to mental health nonprofits, Because if there's one thing burnt coffee taught me, it's that no one gets through the grind alone. I wake up every morning, brew a cup of something that tastes like chaos and citrus, and smile. Because somehow, the biggest joke I ever told became the truest thing I've ever done. And I'm not done laughing yet. I used to think success was all about flashy pitches, big investors, and Shark Tank vibes. But the story of how I accidentally built a $4M/your business out of desperation and duct tape is a little grittier. It starts with me crying in a Wendy's parking lot with $3.14 in my bank account and a broken laptop in the trunk. 3 years ago, I was 28, broke, and jobless. I had quit my marketing job at a SaaS company because I genuinely thought I could build a social media app that would change the way people connect. You know, one of those meaningless Silicon Valley phrases I had learned to say with a straight face. The app failed spectacularly. I had a dev friend from college build it for cheap. I spent 6 months promoting it on Twitter and Reddit, and nothing. We had 184 users and 3 of them were my mom on different phones. No revenue. No real interest. I burned through my savings, borrowed $8K from my sister, and maxed out 2 credit cards on ads that didn't convert. It died in silence. I moved into a crappy sublet in Dayton, Ohio, thinking I could regroup. But really, I just wallowed. It got to the point where I started selling my old gaming consoles and books on Facebook Marketplace for rent money. Then one day, I got a message from a woman named Lauren. She wanted to buy my old Canon DSLR. When she came to pick it up, she mentioned she was starting an Etsy store for handmade jewelry and needed photos of her pieces. I joked, "Well, you're getting a good camera for it." She replied, "I wish I knew how to use it." For some reason, I offered to help. I had taken a photography elective in college and still remembered some basics. We met in a park. I shot a few pictures of her jewelry with natural light, edited them that night, and sent them to her. She loved them, posted them the next day, made 6 sales. Then she tagged me. Within a week, I had 4 other Etsy sellers DMing me asking for similar photos. I charged them $50 each, then $75, then $100. I called the service SideClick because it sounded techy and non-committal. I spun up a basic landing page using Card and Stripe. I didn't even have a real camera anymore, so I bought a $600 used one off eBay with my last bit of credit. It arrived 2 days late and I had to reschedule 3 shoots. But I was in business. Here's where it got interesting. I realized most of these sellers didn't care about the photos themselves. They wanted their products to look professional. They wanted content for their Instagram, Etsy banners, thumbnails, Pinterest, and newsletters. So I stopped thinking like a photographer and started thinking like a marketer again. Within 3 months, I had a list of 40 recurring clients. I wasn't making bank yet, maybe $5K/month, but I could eat and pay rent without a panic attack. I bought a cheap light box, upgraded my camera, and started offering video loops for Etsy listings, those autoplay product videos you see now. I hired my cousin to help with editing and set up a shipping address so clients could mail me their products. Then came the packaging lady. She sold eco-friendly, customizable packaging for small businesses and wanted me to shoot a video for a Kickstarter. I charged $500, filmed it in my living room, edited it in 2 sleepless nights, and sent it off. She raised $60K in a week. That got me thinking. I asked her if she'd let me take a cut on sales in exchange for a reduced upfront rate. She agreed. I made $200 from her first production batch just on commission. That's when SideClick evolved. I realized I wasn't just offering content, I was becoming a sales partner. So I started packaging my services into growth kits. For $9.99, you'd get photos, videos, keyword-optimized Etsy listings, and Instagram content. For $1 for $99, I'd throw in newsletter templates and influencer outreach. I pitched it as a plug-and-play content team for solo creators. It exploded. Within 6 months, I had to stop taking new clients. I built a waitlist, hired 2 more photographers, and flew them out for a weekend to teach them how to shoot the SideClick style. I outsourced editing to a freelancer in the Philippines. I built a Notion dashboard to track every client, content piece, platform, and deliverable. My mom helped with shipping logistics. We ran out of space and moved everything into a scrappy 600 square foot studio behind a dog grooming shop. The turning point came when a YouTube channel for e-commerce tools did a 10-minute review of SideClick and called us the secret weapon behind some of Etsy's fastest-growing shops. We got 1,200 signups in a week. I closed my laptop, went outside, and screamed. Today, SideClick makes around $4 million a year. I've got a team of 18, including content creators, strategists, editors, and client managers. We work with creators on Etsy, Shopify, Amazon Handmade, and even TikTok Shop. Our average client stays with us for 9.6 months and earns 3.8x more within 60 days of starting with us. I still live in Ohio. I still do some photo shoots myself because I genuinely love it. Here's what I learned. 1. Success doesn't always come from your dream idea. Sometimes it comes from helping someone else with theirs. 2. You don't need to be the best at something. You just need to solve a painful problem better than anyone else. 3. Momentum builds when you listen more than you pitch. 4. Growth happens at the edge of your skill set, where you're most uncomfortable. 5. Don't underestimate how much people will pay to avoid hassle. And lastly, you don't need a tech co-founder, a seed round, or a pitch deck to start a business. You need one person with a problem and your willingness to solve it like your life depends on it. Because sometimes it actually does. I never set out to be an entrepreneur. I wasn't the kid selling lemonade or flipping sneakers on eBay in middle school. In fact, I was the complete opposite, risk-averse, straight-A student, obedient to the bone. My parents were immigrants who worked 3 jobs between them, and their version of success was simple: get a stable job, buy a house, and never owe anyone anything. So when I landed a $95K software engineering role straight out of college, I thought I'd made it. I was 23, single, no debt, and living in a modest apartment in Jersey. I coded, collected paychecks, bought a reliable used Honda, and paid off my parents' mortgage by year 2. That moment felt like the top. The American dream. But then I hit a wall. It was 2020. You know what that you're meant for everyone. Pandemic. Remote work. Existential dread. With all the downtime, I started playing around with an idea I'd had for years but never pursued: automated resume tailoring. You see, in college, I helped a bunch of international students rewrite their resumes to pass through applicant tracking systems. It was a dumb but tedious process. Keywords, formats, matching job descriptions, the whole thing. I thought, why doesn't a tool just do this? So I started building one in my free time. Nothing revolutionary. Just a web app that analyzed a job description and restructured your resume to match, using machine learning and natural language processing. It spit out a tailored PDF in 30 seconds. I called it SharpMatch. Thought it sounded techy enough. I launched it on Product Hunt with 0 expectations and a $200 Google Ads budget. I figured I might get a few signups, maybe some feedback. I went to bed after hitting submit and forgot about it. The next morning, I had 12,000 signups. Apparently, a mid-level hiring manager from Facebook had tweeted about it, calling it the best resume hack of 2020, and it went viral in the tech job hunting community. My AWS usage exploded. Stripe froze my account from suspicious activity. I had to upgrade my GitHub plan, and I didn't even know that was a thing. I spent the next 72 hours fixing bugs, responding to emails, and basically watching my side project turn into a legitimate business overnight. By the end of week 1, I had 30,000 users. I put up a $9/month paywall with a free trial. 6,400 people subscribed. I did the math. That was nearly $58K in recurring monthly revenue. I was making more than my salary. I was still sitting on my IKEA chair, wearing pajama pants and drinking cold brew, and I had no clue how to run a company. I gave myself 90 days. If the income stayed consistent, I'd quit my job. But life doesn't work like a linear growth chart. The wave dipped hard. Complaints came in. Someone posted a Medium article calling SharpMatch a lazy AI scam that didn't truly understand industry nuances. I panicked. Tried to argue in the comments. Big mistake. Churn hit 40%. I lost almost half my subscribers in a month. The dopamine crash was real. I almost scrapped the whole thing and begged my manager to give me a raise. But I didn't. Instead, I emailed 300 users who had canceled. I asked one question: what's one thing you wish SharpMatch did better? Out of 300, about 70 responded. Half said the same thing. They wanted human feedback too. So I pivoted. I built a feature called Human Review, where, for an extra $19, you could get your resume looked over by a vetted hiring expert within 24 hours. I recruited 3 friends in HR, paid them $40/review, and kept the rest. Subscriptions jumped again. Not as crazy as before, but healthy, predictable, and the churn slowed. By month 6, I was at $84K MRR. That was the moment I finally put in my notice at my job. I still remember the Slack message. My manager thought I got poached by Google. The next year was a blur. I hired a small remote team, one back-end dev from Poland, a content marketer from Chicago, and a freelance designer from Bali. We ran everything on Notion, Slack, and Stripe. No office, no investors, just cash flow. Then a career coaching startup offered to acquire us. $3.4 million. All cash. I owned 91% of the company at the time. I was 26. I didn't take the deal. Everyone I knew said I was crazy. My dad didn't speak to me for a week. My ex sent a congrats on selling text even though I hadn't. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't done. We launched a job matching feature that used your resume to recommend high-fit job postings in real time. That blew up again. This time with recruiters. They started using our platform to scout passive candidates. By year 3, we were doing $3.2 million in ARR. And in 2024, LinkedIn sent us a buyout offer I couldn't refuse. I sold SharpMatch for $11.5 million. I paid off my parents' retirement, bought a brownstone in Brooklyn, and invested in 3 other startups. I'm 28 now and quietly working on something new. Something bigger. But here's the real reason I'm telling this story. Everyone thinks entrepreneurship is about genius ideas or massive risk. It's not. It's about listening, really listening, to people when they tell you what's wrong. It's about staying in the game long enough to get lucky, then not screwing it up when you do. You don't need to be brilliant. You just need to care enough to fix what people hate. And keep doing it over and over until they start paying you for it. And that's exactly what I did. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. Honestly, I used to roll my eyes at people who said they hustled 24/7 or posted screenshots of Shopify dashboards like they were flexing a six-pack. All I ever wanted was stability, a 9 to 5, a coffee on the way to work, a bi-weekly paycheck. But life has a way of laughing in your face when you get too comfortable. It started when the company I worked for, an analytics SaaS startup, was acquired and promptly gutted. Entire departments vanished overnight. I survived the first round. But when the second round came, I got a calendar invite titled Sync. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. I was 32, jobless, and in a lease I couldn't break. I gave myself 2 weeks to spiral. I did everything the recently fired are known for. Watching garbage reality shows at 3 a.m., eating microwave pasta out of the container, sending out resumes that never got replies. Then one night, my neighbor, this oddball guy named Ravi, asked me to help move a couch. After we got it up 3 flights of stairs, he offered me a beer. We sat on his tiny balcony, sweat-drenched, looking out at nothing in particular. He asked what I was going to do next. I told him I had no clue. He said, "Why not try flipping pallets?" I blinked. What the hell does that mean? Ravi explained that liquidation pallets, unsold or returned items from big box retailers, could be bought in bulk and resold online. It sounded like nonsense, like something off a late-night infomercial. But 2 beers later, I was Googling how to buy liquidation pallets. I used $600 of my last paycheck and bought a pallet from a warehouse in the next city over. It was marked as general merchandise, mixed condition. That should have been a red flag. When I showed up to pick it up in my borrowed SUV, it was basically a giant wooden crate full of rejected consumer hopes. Broken blenders, scratched toasters, a garden gnome with a chipped nose, and for some reason, 20 phone cases for a discontinued LG phone. I was pissed, but I listed the working items on eBay anyway, just to see. 3 days later, someone paid $34 for a rice cooker I thought was junk. Then $18 for the garden gnome. One by one, the junk started moving. I didn't make a profit, but I got close. And more importantly, I was hooked. Over the next few weeks, I got better at buying. I learned to read the codes on manifests. I learned which warehouse managers would actually let me peek at the pallets. I rented a tiny storage unit, then another. I stopped job hunting altogether. I told myself this was temporary, just until I found something real. By month 3, I was making $2,000 a month. Not much, but more than unemployment. I started reinvesting everything. I found a niche, small kitchen appliances. People loved air fryers and espresso machines, and most returned items worked perfectly fine once cleaned up. Then came the day I got a pallet with 6 high-end espresso machines. I listed them for $180 each. They sold out in a weekend. I remember sitting in my car outside the post office, staring at the PayPal balance on my phone. $1,080. In 2 days. That's when I decided I wasn't going back to corporate. I was building something, even if it looked nothing like a traditional business. I called the business Brew Box Bargains because espresso machines were my cash cow and alliteration makes people trust you more for some reason. I set up an Instagram, started posting unboxing videos. Some people laughed at the mess, others were fascinated. By year 1, I had made just shy of $70,000 in revenue. I was still doing everything myself: buying, hauling, cleaning, listing, shipping. My apartment looked like an Amazon returns center exploded. But it was mine. Every cent, every win, every mistake. Then I hit my first real wall. A pallet I bought, marked premium electronics, turned out to be mostly scrap. I lost $300 in a week. Another pallet had bedbugs. I had to toss half my inventory. For the first time, I felt real fear. What if this was the dumbest thing I'd ever done? I took a week off. No sourcing, no listing. Just me in a quiet apartment, wondering if I should start polishing my resume again. Then I got an email from a customer, just 3 lines. "Hey, bought a coffee maker from you last month. Still working great. Thanks for the deal." It wasn't profound, but it shook me. Someone out there had benefited from the mess I was clawing through. I wasn't just selling junk. I was giving good stuff a second life. So I doubled down. I got a partner, an old college friend who was bored at his accounting job. We split tasks. I focused on sourcing and branding. He handled shipping and operations. We moved into a shared warehouse space with another reseller. We hired 2 part-time packers. By year 2, we cleared $220,000 in revenue. Profit margins were thin, maybe 15%. But we were growing. Slowly, but deliberately. Then came the call that changed everything. A local liquidation warehouse manager I knew told me a national coffee chain was closing 40 locations and liquidating equipment. Espresso machines, grinders, furniture, signage. I borrowed $8,000 and rented a U-Haul. It was hell, hot, greasy, disorganized, but we cleaned out 3 locations in 2 days. Those espresso machines? Each one resold for $500 plus. One went to a cafe in Oregon, another to a guy in Brooklyn who said it made him feel like a barista. In 6 weeks, we turned $8,000 into $24000. We finally had a buffer. We finally weren't just surviving. Last month, I got invited to speak at a small business panel in my city. I told the story of the chipped garden gnome, of pallets with bedbugs, of crying in a storage unit surrounded by broken toasters. And I told them this: you don't have to change the world to build something worth doing. You just have to show up when it gets ugly. You have to believe in the thing no one else sees yet. Today, Brewbox Bargains has 3 employees, a 2,000 square feet warehouse, and a website that doesn't look like it was built in 2007. We're not a unicorn. We're not on TechCrunch. But we are profitable. We are real. And I wouldn't trade it for any real job in the world. I didn't set out to become an entrepreneur. I was just trying to pay rent. In 2017, I was 24, newly fired, and living in a shared basement unit in Chicago. I'd been working as a junior account manager at a marketing firm, and, to be blunt, I was bad at it. My degree was in English, and the only thing I was ever really good at was writing. But writing doesn't pay, not right away. So there I was, unemployed with $680 in my checking account, and rent coming up in 10 days. I started scouring Craigslist, Fiverr, and Upwork, trying to find anything. I landed a couple quick gigs writing product descriptions for a drop shipping site. They paid $15 per 500 words, and the guy wanted them fast. I banged out 10 in 1 day. It was soul-sucking, but the guy said he liked my work and gave me more. That's when the idea hit me. What if I started a product site? I knew nothing about e-commerce, nothing about sourcing, suppliers, or even how Shopify worked. But I knew how to write, and I had time. I gave myself 3 days to research the hell out of drop shipping. Every waking minute was spent watching YouTube tutorials, reading subreddits, and analyzing ads. I learned about Oberlo, AliExpress, product margins, and which niches had low competition. On day 4, I bought a domain, barkkingdom.com. Yes, I know how dumb that sounds now, but dog products were huge, and I figured if I could just catch one viral trend, I'd have rent money. I built the store using Shopify's free trial. I listed 12 products: chew toys, a car seat cover, collapsible bowls, a ridiculous lion's mane dog costume. Then I created an Instagram account, started reposting dog memes, and followed 2,000 accounts. I ran my first Facebook ad that weekend. I spent $12 promoting the lion's mane costume with a mock-up I made in Canva. The ad tanked. No sales. But on day 8, something weird happened. Someone tagged a friend in the comments. Then another. By day 9, the ad had over 50 comments and 400 likes. I refreshed Shopify at 1 a.m. and saw it. My first sale. $19.99 for a costume that cost me $4.17. I couldn't sleep that night. The next day, I got 4 more sales. Then 11. I started scaling the ad. By day 14, I had made over $1,200 in revenue. I paid rent. But drop shipping is a fickle beast. Shipping times from China were awful, customers complained, chargebacks happened, and margins were thinner than I expected. After 3 months, I shut down Bark Kingdom. I made a little over $9,000 in profit and treated myself to a nice pair of headphones and a new mattress. I figured that was it. Fun ride. Back to real life. But I had the bug now. I'd seen what could happen when you build something that people actually respond to. I decided to go all in. I started freelance copywriting full-time. I built a simple site, pitched local businesses, and wrote for whoever would pay. Over time, I specialized in landing pages for e-commerce stores. My clients got results, and they referred more clients. One day, a supplement startup asked me if I'd consider joining as a co-founder in exchange for sweat equity and 10% of the company. I said yes. We launched in mid-2019. I wrote everything: product pages, ads, email funnels. We did $400K in sales the first year. It was bootstrapped, chaotic, and we almost ran out of money 5 times. Then COVID hit. Suddenly, people cared about health more than ever. Our main product, a vitamin D plus K supplement, started trending. Sales spiked. I doubled down on email campaigns and retargeting. By the end of 2020, we hit $3.1 million in revenue. That year, I made more than both my parents combined. But here's where things took a turn. My co-founder and I had never formalized our agreement beyond a handshake and some emails. When we brought in a small seed round in early 2021, he used that opportunity to restructure equity. Suddenly, my 10% was now performance-based and tied to milestones I didn't agree to. We argued. A lot. I lawyered up. The lawyers told me it would cost more to fight than to walk away. So I walked. I kept my freelance clients and left the company I helped build. It wrecked me. I fell into a slump for months. I'd tasted real success, and it had turned to ash. I spent the summer of 2021 freelancing, reading Stoicism, and thinking about what the hell I actually wanted. In October, an old client called. He said he was launching a new CPG brand focused on mushroom-based energy drinks and needed someone to make it sound cool. I agreed to a flat fee and a small equity stake. I named the product, wrote the launch copy, and helped design the first email campaign. We launched in January 2022. That brand, Rally Root, blew up. Not TikTok viral, but big enough to get featured in Forbes, picked up by a regional distributor, and land in Whole Foods across 5 states by late 2023. My copy had a voice. People connected with it. This time, I had a contract. In April 2024, we were acquired by a larger wellness conglomerate. It wasn't a billion-dollar exit, but my cut was just under $2.4 million. I cried. In my kitchen. Alone. Not because of the money, but because after all the gigs, all the almosts, all the burnout and betrayal, I had finally finished something. Today, I live in Austin. I still write, but mostly for myself. I angel invest in bootstrap founders who remind me of me. No big fund, no suits, just checks and conversations. Here's what I've learned. The first win won't look like a win. It might be a $20 sale that lets you make rent. It might be a failed store that teaches you Facebook ads, or a client who ends up changing your life. What matters is that you start, that you make something, anything. Because when the world shows you that people will pay you for what you create, you can never go back. When I was 27, I quit my job in a blaze of glory that would have made my high school guidance counselor cry. I was working at a marketing agency in Chicago. Good money, great benefits, and a steady path upward if I just smiled through the stress and didn't question the 3 a.m. Slack messages from execs who swore it was urgent. I had just gotten engaged, had a decent apartment, and parents who were relieved I finally had something resembling a stable life. But I hated every single day. I remember sitting on the toilet during lunch breaks, scrolling through Reddit threads like, "I just quit," and "Entrepreneur," fantasizing about some great exit. I wasn't even sure what I wanted to do. I just knew it wasn't designing PPC ads for fintech brothers. The breaking point came one rainy Wednesday in February. My boss sent me a snide email about a tone issue in an internal memo. I snapped. I walked out midday, drove to my apartment, and by nightfall, I had cleared out my desk. No backup plan. My fiancée, now wife, thought I'd lost it. For a month, I spiraled. I tried to freelance, which basically meant I watched YouTube videos on branding while telling people I was between gigs. I drank too much coffee, reapplied to 9-5s I didn't want, and ignored the steadily draining savings account. Then, one night, I was doom-scrolling Reddit again when I landed on a weird thread about custom mechanical keyboards. I had never really thought about keyboards, but people were obsessed. They talked about switches like they were fine wine. They showed off $400 boards like others show off cars. Curious, I dug deeper. There were niche Discord servers, dedicated subreddits, and tiny Shopify stores selling artisan keycaps shaped like ramen bowls or Pokemon. It was chaotic, obsessive, and totally unhinged. I loved it. I ordered a hot swappable kit, a couple of cheap switches, and tried to build my first board. It sucked. I stabbed the stabilizers, the soldering looked like bird droppings, and the keys squeaked like a rubber duck. But for the first time in months, I felt something close to joy. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I thought, what if I leaned into this? Not just building keyboards, but designing something that stood out. What if I didn't compete with big names, but made boards that were a little unhinged? Weird? Fun? I called it Trash Type. It started as a joke, keyboards built for chaos. I designed a board layout that spelled FML in pastel pink on the arrow keys. Another one had an escape key shaped like a cartoon bomb. I listed a couple prototypes on Etsy. They were rough, but they were mine. In 2 weeks, I sold 3. The first customer emailed me a photo of the board on his cluttered desk, saying it made him smile through the pain of spreadsheets. That email did something to me. It wasn't about the money. I made like $11 after shipping and materials. It was about making something that someone wanted, and that didn't exist before I created it. I doubled down. I bought a resin printer off Craigslist and started designing keycaps shaped like cursed emojis and retro Game Boys. I learned Fusion 360 from YouTube. I DM'd small Twitch streamers and offered custom builds for exposure. Most ignored me. One didn't. He had 3K followers but was loud and passionate, and his unboxing of a board I made him with Rajaquit in blood red letters went mildly viral. That video got me 400 orders in a weekend. I wasn't ready. My kitchen became a workshop. My living room, storage. My relationship almost collapsed under the stress of 18-hour build days and a resin smell that clung to our curtains. But slowly, I learned how to scale. I outsourced the manufacturing of PCB boards to a small shop in Texas. I hired a college kid off Fiverr to handle customer service. I bought a domain, trashtype.io, and built a Shopify site. I launched a Discord and a meme-heavy Instagram account. I leaned into the weirdness. Our slogan became, Trash Type, Press Chaos. In our first year, we made $87K in revenue. In our second year, $311K. By year 3, I quit building boards myself. We launched 3 collections, each more chaotic than the last. One was themed around early 2000s internet. Think AOL, LimeWire, and Clippy-themed caps. Another was a collaboration with a tattoo artist who made hand-drawn key legends and punk ink styles. But the weirdest moment came last year, when a producer from Netflix emailed me. He said they were doing a new show about oddball online subcultures and wanted to feature Trash Type. I thought it was a prank until he invited me to his studio in LA. I flew out, met a crew, showed off our Destruct board, a limited edition metal case with only one giant red button, and babbled about chaotic design. 3 months later, our site crashed from traffic. We sold out of our next 3 drops in minutes. I had to hire full-time ops and logistics staff. I got an accountant. I even got health insurance again, though now I pay for it myself. Trash Type isn't a unicorn. We're not aiming for VC funding or billion-dollar exits. We're a weird little crew of keyboard goblins making strange things for strange people. And I've never been happier. If you had told 27-year-old me, crying on the floor of his apartment after quitting his job with zero plan, that his future involved cursed keyboards and Discord mods named things like Key Smash 420, I would have laughed and maybe cried harder. But here I am. Press chaos. I was 28 when I started my first business, a small coffee shop. At that time, I was working a dead-end job in retail, barely scraping by. It wasn't that I hated my job, it was more that I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant for something bigger. I had always been passionate about coffee. I spent countless hours experimenting with different blends, learning about different brewing methods, and even visiting local roasters. Everyone around me said, "You should open your own coffee shop," but I always thought it was just a dream, a distant fantasy. But one day, something clicked. I was sitting in a small cafe during my lunch break, sipping on a latte that I wasn't particularly impressed with, and I thought to myself, I could do this better. The place was busy, the atmosphere was great, but the coffee was mediocre. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I could bring something new to the table, not just in terms of quality, but also in terms of customer experience. I knew that if I was going to open a coffee shop, it had to be special, different from everything else around me. I started doing research, reading books, talking to other small business owners, and researching locations. It was overwhelming at first, especially because I didn't have much money saved up. I was living paycheck to paycheck, and the idea of securing a loan seemed like a distant dream. But I didn't give up. I cut back on expenses, started selling things I didn't need, and worked extra hours to save up enough for a small down payment. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start looking for a space. The first location I looked at was a small, rundown storefront on a quiet street. The rent was cheap, but the space was in rough shape. It needed a lot of work, and honestly, I wasn't sure if it was worth the investment. But something about it felt right. It had potential. The landlord was willing to work with me, and after a lot of back and forth, I signed a lease. The next few months were a blur. I spent every waking hour working on the shop. I designed the layout, sourced equipment, ordered inventory, and, most importantly, found the perfect coffee beans. I hired a couple of employees to help me, but it was mostly me doing the heavy lifting. I painted the walls myself, installed shelves, and even learned how to fix a few things around the shop to save money. It was exhausting, but every step felt like progress. Opening day came, and to be honest, I was terrified. I had no idea what to expect. I had spent so much time building up this dream, and now it was real. Would people like the coffee? Would they even notice my little shop among all the bigger, more established cafes? The morning of the grand opening, I stood in front of the door, watching the minutes tick by, wondering if anyone would show up. At 8 a.m., I opened the doors. To my surprise, there was a line of people waiting outside. I was overwhelmed. I served my first customers, and the feedback was amazing. People loved the coffee, loved the atmosphere, and many said they'd be back. By the end of the day, I had made more sales than I'd expected. It was a small win, but it was enough to keep me going. Over the next few months, the business grew slowly but steadily. I learned a lot about running a business, especially the importance of customer service. I spent time getting to know my regulars, and they started recommending my coffee shop to others. Word of mouth spread, and before I knew it, I had a steady stream of customers. I didn't make a huge profit in the beginning, but I was breaking even, which was more than I had hoped for. But just as things were starting to pick up, I hit a roadblock. One of my key suppliers went out of business, and suddenly, I couldn't get the beans I had been using. I scrambled to find a new supplier, but it wasn't easy. I had to adjust my menu and experiment with new coffee blends. The first batch of beans I tried didn't go over well, and sales dipped. I was frustrated and scared. My dream of owning a successful coffee shop was starting to feel like a pipe dream again. But instead of giving up, I took a step back and refocused. I spent even more time learning about different beans and coffee roasters, experimenting with new blends, and talking to other shop owners who had been through similar struggles. Slowly but surely, I found a new supplier, and the quality of my coffee improved. The business picked up again, but this time, I had learned an important lesson. I could never rely on just one source for anything. I needed to diversify and always be prepared for the unexpected. By the time I hit my 2-year anniversary, I had made a profit for the first time. It wasn't huge, but it was enough to show me that I was on the right track. I took the profits and reinvested them back into the business, improving the shop's interior, hiring more staff, and expanding the menu. I started offering pastries, sandwiches, and specialty drinks. I also began offering delivery services, which helped to increase sales even further. But just as things were going well, the pandemic hit. Like many small businesses, I was devastated. The coffee shop, which had been bustling with customers just weeks earlier, was now empty. I had to make the difficult decision to temporarily close my doors. I applied for government relief, but it wasn't enough to cover the rent or my other expenses. I was losing money fast, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep going. But once again, I refused to give up. I switched to a takeout and delivery model, but it wasn't enough to sustain the business. Then, I had an idea: virtual coffee subscriptions. I started offering customers the option to purchase a monthly coffee subscription, where they would receive bags of freshly roasted coffee beans delivered to their homes each month. The idea took off, and within a few months, I was not only able to keep the business afloat, but I was also able to grow it. I expanded my online presence, started offering coffee accessories, and began offering virtual coffee classes. It wasn't the ideal situation, but it kept the business going. Now, 5 years later, my coffee shop is thriving. I've opened 2 more locations, expanded my online presence, and built a loyal customer base. I've learned a lot along the way, from dealing with suppliers to navigating the challenges of a global pandemic. But the most important lesson I've learned is that entrepreneurship isn't about avoiding failure. It's about learning from it, adapting, and never giving up. It hasn't been easy. There have been moments when I've questioned whether it was all worth it, but looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. My coffee shop has become my passion, my life, and my legacy. I know that success doesn't happen overnight, but with hard work, dedication, and a willingness to adapt, anything is possible. I never would have thought that a small coffee shop, a dream I had while working a dead-end job, would turn into something bigger than I ever imagined. But here I am, living my dream, and it's all because I took a chance on myself. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: if you have a dream, pursue it. The road will be tough, but the reward is worth it. I had always been the kind of person who believed in the power of hard work. Growing up in a small town where opportunities were limited, my parents always emphasized the value of education and determination. I often heard them say, "Success doesn't come to those who wait, it comes to those who act." I took those words to heart, but there was one problem. I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do with my life. After high school, I went to college with the intention of majoring in business. It seemed like the safest bet. After all, everyone around me was either studying business or something related to it. I thought maybe I could work my way up in a corporate job and eventually find some stability. But something inside me always craved more. More freedom, more control, more of the feeling that I was building something with my own hands. During my second year of college, I started experimenting with side hustles. I tried everything: selling clothes on eBay, flipping electronics, even trying to design t-shirts. It was all small stuff, but it gave me a taste of what it was like to have control over my own financial destiny. However, I didn't get serious about it until the summer before my senior year. That summer, I had an internship at a startup. The company was small, just a handful of employees, but the energy in the office was unlike anything I had ever experienced. There was something about the founder of the company that stuck with me. He wasn't the smartest person in the room, but he had an undeniable vision. He had started the company from scratch, and he wasn't afraid to take risks. He taught me the one lesson that changed everything for me. Business isn't just about the products or services you sell, it's about solving problems. That's what people pay for: solutions to their problems, big or small. At that moment, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I realized I could create my own company, one that solved a problem I personally faced. But there was one catch. I had no idea what that problem was. So, I began paying attention to everything around me, thinking about what I could improve. One night, while sitting in a coffee shop with some friends, I overheard a conversation about people struggling to stay organized. It wasn't a huge conversation, but something about it struck me. People were frustrated with the way they managed tasks and schedules. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much time people wasted trying to organize their lives in ways that didn't work for them. I spent the next few weeks researching. I started by talking to my friends, family, and colleagues to get a better understanding of their pain points when it came to staying organized. I also checked out the apps they were using. Most of them were either too complicated or didn't fit the user's needs. That's when I came up with the idea for an app that would simplify task management, one that would focus on ease of use while still being effective. It wasn't a groundbreaking concept, but it was something I could improve upon. I was still in college at the time, but I decided to take the plunge. I wasn't going to let my lack of experience stop me. I started learning everything I could about app development. I watched YouTube tutorials, read books, and reached out to people in tech communities who might be able to help me. It wasn't easy. I spent sleepless nights coding, getting frustrated, and then going back to the drawing board. Finally, after months of hard work, I had a prototype ready. It was far from perfect, but it was enough to get feedback. I reached out to a few friends who were into tech and had them test the app. They loved it, but they also had some suggestions for improvement. The more feedback I got, the more I realized I had to refine the app to meet the needs of a wider audience. I started pitching the app to investors, but the rejection letters piled up. Everyone seemed to think it was a good idea, but no one was willing to put money into something so new and risky. I was discouraged, but I kept going. I scraped together what little savings I had, hired a small team, and launched the app with zero funding. It wasn't easy, and the first few months were rough. The app didn't get much traction, and I was running low on funds. I had to borrow money from family and cut costs wherever I could. But just when I thought I was done for, something unexpected happened. A well-known tech blogger wrote a review about the app, praising its simplicity and user-friendly design. Traffic to the app's website exploded, and the downloads started pouring in. It was a game-changer. Investors who had previously turned me down were now calling me, asking if I was looking for funding. Over the next year, I managed to secure the funding I needed to scale the company. We improved the app, added more features, and launched a marketing campaign. I hired a team of developers, designers, and marketers, and we worked tirelessly to make sure the app was everything we promised it would be. Now, 3 years later, my company is thriving. We have thousands of users, and we've expanded our product line to include more productivity tools. But what I've learned over the years is that success doesn't come overnight. It's not just about having a great idea. It's about persistence, learning from failure, and constantly improving. The road to building a successful business is full of setbacks, but the key is to keep going. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. I went from being a college student with no experience to running a successful tech company. And the best part? I get to wake up every day knowing that I'm building something that helps people solve real problems. It's not just about the money anymore. It's about creating something that makes a difference in people's lives. So, if you're out there thinking about starting your own business, I want to say this. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for everything to fall into place. The perfect moment will never come. Start small, keep learning, and don't be afraid to fail. The journey won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.